Good morning, everyone. My name is Cesar Alesi Perez. I'm a research associate with the Higher Education Center at the Public Policy Institute of California. Welcome to our virtual program today, featuring the findings from our latest PPIC report, Strengthening California's Transfer Pathway. The report, technical appendices, and policy brief, as well as the slides for today's presentation are all available on our website at ppic.org. For today's program, I'll walk you through some of the key findings of the report. Then I'll hand the program over to my colleague and co-author Marisol Cuellar Mejia to moderate a discussion with an esteemed panel of state experts on transfer before opening it up to questions from the audience for the final 15 minutes of the program. Before getting into the report findings, we would like to first thank our funders, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Sutton Family Fund, for their support of this research and today's event. I'd also like to remind the audience that PPIC is a public charity, does not take or support positions on any ballot measures or legislation, nor does it support, endorse, or oppose any political parties or candidates for public office. And lastly, if you have any questions for our speakers about the report or panel discussion, please send an email along with your name and organization to the address on the screen, ppiceventquestions@gmail.com. And with that, I will now begin my presentation. The report for which this presentation is based is co-authored by myself, my colleagues Marisol Cuellar Mejia, Hans Johnson, and Jacob Jackson. In addition to our funders, my co-authors and I would also like to send a special thank you to our California Community College System partners. This research would not be possible without the student-level data provided by the Chancellor's office. Now, before getting into our results, I'd like to first talk about why strengthening the transfer pathway from California community colleges to four-year universities is of critical importance right now. So first, California has one of the highest shares of transfer students among undergraduate enrollment in the country, with about 40% of California State University or CSU students and a quarter of University of California or UC students coming from California community colleges. In fact, California's community college system is the largest in the country, serving almost 2 million students, most of whom are from low-income and historically underrepresented groups, and therefore reflect the diversity of the state's population. This means the transfer path is a critical access point for many of these students to obtain a bachelor's degree and in turn strengthen their economic security. Such outcomes are currently of heightened relevance given the state's goals to improve educational attainment levels among the state's future workforce. So, given this backdrop, I'd like to start with some of the challenges facing the transfer pathway. The current urgency of reform and improvement is at least partly influenced by the significant impact the pandemic had on community college enrollment, which has also begun to impact transfer enrollment at the state's four-year universities. This decline in enrollment can be seen in this chart, which shows the number of fall California community college transfers to CSU and UC over time. After many years of strong increases, transfer enrollment dropped for the first time in fall 2021 and again in fall 2022. And while fall 2023 data is not yet available, there are indications that this decline in transfer enrollment might persist, as applications for transfer to UC from California community college students fell by almost 4% from fall 2022 to fall 2023. Now, while enrollment declines are recent, large equity gaps in transfer attainment are longstanding, further intensifying the need for reform. Promisingly, despite disparities in transfer rates across racial and ethnic groups, the share of students among underrepresented groups as a whole has grown over time at UC and CSU. Here, we see how the share of students from each racial and ethnic group among CSU transfers has changed over time. Most notably, the share of Latino students has increased significantly from about 31% to 47% over the last 10 years, while the share of white students has declined. At UC, we see a similar trend, though representation among Latino students in transfer has not grown as much as it has at CSU, increasing from 22% of transfers to 26% over the last 10 years. In addition to, still, Latino students account for half of community college enrollment, so they remain underrepresented among transfers to UC, highlighting that more work is needed to reach equity. Now, in our report, we also examined whether the state's transfer students reflect the geographic distribution of the state's college students. Ideally, an equitable geographic distribution of students would mean equal shares between California community college enrollment and CSU and UC enrollment across all major regions of the state. However, while the distribution of CSU students is in line with community college enrollment, large regional disparities are prevalent at UC, where the Bay Area is significantly overrepresented among transfers. On the other hand, the share of transfers to UC from the San Joaquin Valley, which represents about 3% of UC transfers, and from the Inland Empire, which represents about 6%, fall significantly below their share of the community college population, which sits at about 10% each. We find that this trend is driven largely by community college students from these regions being less likely to apply to UC. Thus, reform that includes regional approaches may be necessary to increase transfer enrollment, especially if there's an untapped supply of transfer intending and transfer ready students in underrepresented regions. So to summarize, the urgency of current reform is at least partly supported by recent declines in enrollment and persistent racial, ethnic, and geographic disparities in transfer outcomes. Perhaps most importantly, however, is that transfer rates remain very low system-wide for all students. Here, we show how the share of transfer intending students who transfer in 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 years has changed by entering cohort from 2015 to 2020. Unfortunately, rates of transfer have yet to meaningfully improve over time. Specifically, about 19% of students transfer within 4 years of initial enrollment and 10% do so within 2 years. And as I mentioned before, racial disparities are large despite low overall transfer rates. About 1 in 4 Asian and white transfer intending students transfer within 4 years, compared to less than 16% of Black and Latino students. All in all, these outcomes highlight that there is large room for improvement in transfer, and collaboration between the state's higher ed systems will be necessary to remove the obstacles to transfer that remain. So with this in mind, I do actually want to highlight some promising trends that are emerging among recent transfer students. These trends point towards the promise and potential of statewide reforms in streamlining the transfer path. In this section of the report and in the next few slides, I focus specifically on students who successfully transferred from a California community college to a four-year university and examine how trends in the distribution of successful transfer students have changed over time. So most importantly, it seems that if students who are transferring are doing so in a shorter amount of time. This chart shows the share of students who transferred in each academic year that transferred within 2 years. So among students who transferred in the 2015-2016 school year, 21% did so within 2 years of initially enrolling in the community college system, while among those that transferred in 2021-2022, 32% transferred within 2 years. So what this tells us is that at least among students who are able to successfully transfer community college to a four-year institution, the path to doing so has become relatively more efficient. This increased efficiency and the length of time to transfer can be explained by a variety of recent trends and initiatives that have aimed to widen and streamline transfer pathways. Here, we just compare outcomes between the 2015-16 cohort and the 2021-2022 cohort of successful transfers, showing how there has been significant growth in the completion of key milestones to transfer. So first, we see a dramatic increase in the share of successful transfer students earning an ADT, or an associate degree for transfer, which are 2-year associate degrees that are fully transferable and guarantee admission to the CSU system. This growth has been driven by an expansion of ADT major offerings over the last few years and is promising given the growing research that shows that ADT earners have higher graduation rates at four-year universities. Now, in terms of shortening the transfer path, placement reforms brought on by AB 705 have widened access to key gateway transfer level English and math courses, providing more opportunities for students to complete both courses within their first year. Here, we see that among successful transfers, only 15% of students who transferred in 2015 completed both courses in 1 year, while 30% did so among 2021 transfers. Lastly, we also find that a higher share of successful transfer students started community college while still attending high school, known as dual enrollment, which allows students to earn transferable credits earlier and shorten the time in community college needed to transfer. So together, these last few trends point towards improved early momentum among students towards completing key milestones to transfer, and they highlight the promise of recent reforms in streamlining the transfer pathway. Now, while these trends are promising, our research also sheds light on the need for more work in the space to better understand which students are transferring where and which students are not transferring at all. For example, in our report, we highlight how the demographic characteristics and academic journeys of students who transfer to a University of California campus differ markedly from those of students who transfer to other four-year institutions. UC transfers are more likely to transfer faster, they're younger, have stated a transfer goal while in community college, and are more likely to earn more units in their first year and complete key milestones along the transfer path. Additionally, we find that about a third of students transferring to out-of-state institutions transfer to universities with large online programs, signaling that perhaps not all of such students are actually leaving the state, and accordingly may have preferences for actually staying in state. Lastly, one of our more troubling findings is that about 27% of students who earn an ADT do not end up transferring. Specifically, we find that about 28,000 students who started their community college journey between 2014 and 2019 earned an ADT but did not transfer as of fall 2022. This suggests that there is an untapped supply of transfer-ready students, and that successfully transferring to a four-year university is still elusive for many of the state's transfer-intending students. Accordingly, the state and its higher education institutions must build upon past efforts and develop new initiatives to widen opportunities for transfer. As we highlighted, recent legislation and initiatives have produced promising results, yet more work is needed to improve transfer rates and close equity gaps. From the perspective of the state's public receiving institutions, namely our CSU and UC campuses, more must be done to reach out to transfer eligible students and encourage more students to prepare for transfer. At the same time, California's community colleges must focus on reducing the remaining barriers that students face in completing the necessary requirements for transfer to their desired four-year institution and major. Perhaps most importantly, continual collaboration between all the state's education systems will be key, as multiple programs and initiatives will be necessary to truly strengthen the transfer path, whether it's expanding dual admissions and dual enrollment programs, creating a single transfer pathway, or developing regional and local partnerships and outreach programs. Promisingly, a lot of this work is happening now, and many colleges and universities are actively working to expand transfer opportunities. Our work shows that these efforts must be scaled, as increasing the number of students transferring to four-year institutions is crucial to preserving higher education's critical role as a ladder of economic mobility in California. And with that, I will end my portion of the program and pass a more challenging discussion on how our institutions can actually achieve this to our esteemed panel of state leaders and experts. Just a reminder, if you have any questions for our speakers about the report or panel discussion, please send an email along with your name and organization to the address on the screen, ppiceventquestions@gmail.com. And with that, I'd like to welcome my co-author and PPIC research fellow, Marisol Cuellar Mejia, who will moderate that discussion.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Cesar, for an amazing presentation and for being a thoughtful partner through this research. So now, I'm very excited to get started. We have a great panel today. A successful transfer path requires the efforts of both community colleges and four-year institutions. So we are very delighted to have with us representatives from the three segments of public higher education in our state. The bios of today's panelists can be found on the PPIC event page. So in the interest of time, we're only going to do brief introductions. Our first panelist is Yvette Gullatt. She is Vice President for Graduate and Undergraduate Affairs, Vice Provost for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and Chief Diversity Officer at the University of California System. Next, we have Aisha Lowe. She is the Executive Vice Chancellor of the Office of Equitable Student Learning Experience and Impact at the California Community College's Chancellor's Office. And finally, we have Laura Massa. She is the Interim Associate Vice Chancellor for Academic and Faculty Programs at the California State University Office of the Chancellor. So welcome and thank you for joining us today and for sharing your expertise and insight with us this morning. As Cesar mentioned, improving transfer rates has become an increasingly important policy goal in California. However, there is still a work to do to realize the full potential of the transfer function. Our goal today is to hear from each one of you about the wonderful things that you are doing in your institutions to strengthen the transfer path and about the challenges that still lie ahead. So let me start our conversation talking about enrollment declines. Cesar showed at the beginning of his presentation that new transfer enroll decline in fall 2021 and fall 2022, and that was true in both CSU and UC. Official enrollment information for fall 2023 is not available yet, but we know that fall transfer applications were down. As we know, we know also that for the most part, these declines reflect community college enrollment declines. I would like to ask each one of you, what are the strategies that your segment is taking to respond to these declines? And what will be the implication if this trend was to continue? So let me start with Aisha this time.
Thank you very much, Marisol. Absolutely, right. I think the reality of enrollment declines is something that we've been watching very closely. Certainly, those declines were happening before the pandemic, and the pandemic really sort of exacerbated and sort of really sped up those enrollment declines. So when we think about what do we do then in the face of those enrollment declines, a couple of things in particular for the community colleges that we're focusing on, and you'll see a lot of this moving forward as we come under the direction of our new chancellor, Dr. Sonia Christian, and what we are now calling Vision 2030, sort of the revamp and revise of our vision for success. So you're going to see a strong focus on this idea that our chancellor is really promoting around how we identify the populations of Californians to whom we need to bring college, as opposed to us waiting for them to come to us. So while certainly our colleges will continue some of the traditional marketing and outreach campaigns, we're really pushing on partnerships and directly identifying where there are pockets of students that we can more actively outreach to and connect with and make partnerships for. So you'll see a strong focus on dual enrollment and how we begin students on a college trajectory while they are still in high school. You will see a strong focus on working adult learners. How do we identify key partnerships with labor associations, labor agencies? How do we identify the community-based organizations that working adult learners are a part of and develop partnerships so that we are bringing programs to them? And you'll also see a strong focus on us developing workforce pathways with a focus on low-income adults in particular. We know that when students come to our colleges, they are looking for more than a credential or a degree. They're looking for a workforce outcome, right? They're looking to upskill or reskill so that they can land a job and get themselves into a career that's going to provide a living wage. So we'll see a strong focus in our Vision 2030 on developing those workforce pathways, going directly to those adult learners so that we can show them these opportunities to cooperate with our system, go on to a 4-year or directly into workforce. So you'll see a strong focus in those areas for us moving forward.
Thank you, Aisha. And we're excited to see those efforts. What about you, Laura?
Well, as the PPIC report notes, nearly half of the California State University's 500,000 students started their higher education journey to community college and achieved CSU admission as transfer students. And so the California community colleges are a vital partner in providing that primary access point and launch pad for our undergraduate students, particularly those who are low income, first generation, or come from other historically underrepresented communities. In fact, in the 2021-2022 academic year alone, the CSU enrolled more than 66,500 new transfer students who then have continued their journey towards a 4-year degree and perhaps beyond after transferring from a California community college. But as the report and you have noted, our transfer population faces some unique challenges, right? There's this steep decrease in the number of students attending California's community colleges, and that will have a domino effect on transfer student applications across the CSU. But as Aisha noted, there's a lot more students who want to get that degree, or we might want to bring into that degree. So, for example, I saw a number that says something, there's like more than 1 million students enrolled in credit-bearing courses in community colleges in fall 2022. So perhaps even within them, there may be more community college students who aspire to transfer, but need some additional support to do so. So as part of our longstanding commitment to the success of every student who aspires to achieve a CSU degree, we are proud of our continuing partnership with the community colleges, right, to help break down barriers and develop some clear pathways, advisement, support for these transfer students. And as part of our efforts in that area, we've developed a new dual admission program that is designed to create a more efficient and accessible pathway for transfer students. And I'm hoping that later we'll have more time to talk about that initiative today.
Definitely. What about you, Yvette? Welcome.
Great, welcome. Thank you, Marisol, and welcome to all of you and to our colleagues. At the university, we've certainly seen the effect of the pandemic much more clearly among our transfer students than we do for our freshman applicants. The good news is that although our preliminary data for fall 23 is showing that applications and admissions declined again this year, they declined by much less than the previous year. And so we're hopeful that the pipeline of community college students is beginning to recover. And to echo my colleagues, partnership to expand transfer preparation and access is more important than ever. This year at the university, we're able to invest more in our community college partnerships thanks to an increased investment in our student academic preparation and educational partnerships programs. So consistent with Cesar's observations and the report's observations, outreach and widening transfer pathways is going to be crucial moving forward. And what these new funds are going to allow us to do is to reach more students. That'll help them learn more about and prepare for transfer to UC. And this is going to be particularly important at colleges that send fewer students to UC currently. As the report recommends, we should increase the transfer to UC from regions such as the Inland Empire and the San Joaquin Valley, as well as other regions that are underrepresented at the university. And so in that spirit, we're entering into new partnerships with colleges in those regions led by our campuses and supported by new funds. And we're looking at ways to accelerate transfer to our campuses across the state. And we're also partnering as campuses to serve regions that lie further from a university campus. We're excited, for example, about a new UC Davis and UC Berkeley collaborative in the North State that'll bring more students from that region to both campuses to learn more, to interact with our students and faculty, and generally start their process. But I think one thing is really clear to us: early engagement with the university is absolutely critical for students to think of themselves as future UC students. And as these new investments at colleges that haven't seen UC as much, this is really vital. And so we're hoping that these new efforts will contribute to our students enrolling in community college as well as pursuing transfer.
Definitely. And in line with that, I know we all acknowledge the importance of increasing the number of transfer, but perhaps more important is closing those racial equity gaps among those who successfully transferred. Because as we know, and Cesar mentioned, community colleges are vital for improving economic mobility and creating a diverse pipeline of educated workers for our state. So despite improvements, as it stands right now, students who successfully transfer do not reflect the full diversity of the state's community college. This is particularly true for students transferring to UC. So I would like to hear about current efforts in your institutions aimed at narrowing those racial equity gaps in transfers. And let me start with Yvette this time.
Great, sure. So you're absolutely right that the ethnic and racial diversity among our transfer students is actually less proportionally than it is on the freshman side at the system perspective. But our transfer applicants and our transfer admits are also more likely to be first generation and low income compared to their first year counterparts. One of the key goals of the university is to close institutional performance gaps in our bachelor's degree attainment. And this is a goal we share with our institutional colleagues in the state. This report actually outlines a number of recommendations that align with the programmatic efforts we're pursuing to close those gaps. So for example, even before a student enrolls in college, the university is working in high schools to help them plan their eventual transfer. This includes support for dual enrollment, which your report shows has played a big role in helping students transfer sooner. I think it's also important that students continue to take their college-ready courses in their senior year so they don't have such a big gap, even if they aren't enrolling in college and high school, but that they don't have such a big gap between the time that they leave high school and the time they enroll in the community college. So we want to continue and expand the work that we're doing with our prospective students by providing advising and support for them to earn college credit while they're in high school, but also to have a transfer plan prior to enrolling at a community college. As the CSUs are doing, dual admissions is a key strategy for us. We have just launched our dual admissions program this year. We did that with freshmen who applied to us who were missing some of the requirements for UC admission. And what we're doing is helping those students enroll and get on a transfer path at their chosen community college, and we're supporting them along that pathway. That includes monitoring their progress, offering them advising and other supports, and also including a provisional offer of financial aid. Because again, early engagement with the university, with our students, our faculty, and our staff who are really championing their success is going to be critical to their effort. Another strategy we're using is to provide academic enrichment support to students to complete the transferable classes, particularly in math and English. These are courses, as your research shows, that can really stymie students and delay their progress. I want to reference something else that's in the report, the importance of programs. I think about Mesa and Puente, which are community college programs that the university administers jointly with the community colleges, as well as a third program that we collaborate with, Emoja, because these have been central to our efforts, and we're going to be expanding our work with them to serve more students at more colleges. And along those same lines, just making sure that transfer students have the benefit of those kinds of programs and services that help them see themselves on our campuses, that help them understand how to finance an education and provide the mentoring and the other supports that students need to transfer. But ultimately, at the university, I think we understand that students need to understand the university as a welcoming place where they can pursue their academic and their career goals successfully, where they're going to feel supported, and where they think they will thrive. And so partnerships with community colleges and programs of the type that I've mentioned here and that your report references can really help build UC transfer culture and are a really important part of our strategy. Your report is also noting the importance of these programs to student transfer success. And I do think in the future, there's an opportunity for us to learn more about how and why they work.
Definitely. And, it is so important what you're saying in terms of changing the mindset. So all high schoolers can believe that they can be UC bound. That there is not a ceiling, that they can be successful if they go to UC, and they have the opportunity to do so. So now, Laura, I would like to hear the same efforts. What efforts are happening in the CSU system to narrow these equity gaps?
I feel like there is so much we are doing here. This is such an important goal for the CSU. And so in trying to think about what to highlight, my mind immediately goes to the Graduation Initiative 2025, right? That we launched that in 2016, and it includes a set of very ambitious goals for improving graduation rates and closing equity gaps for our students. And we're making good progress towards our goals, right? For example, we have a goal of graduating at least 45% of our transfer students in 2 years. And the rate currently stands at 40.2. So we're getting close. We also want to graduate 85% of our transfer students within 4 years, and we're currently at 80.3. So we're making progress on these goals. And it's not just that we set goals, we developed a range of support and programs across the 23 universities to help get students across the finish line, right, to get them to those graduation rates. In 2021, we initiated several priority programs designed to include equity, to close equity gaps. And so those include things like re-engaging and re-enrolling underserved students who've left the university, right? So we're using data to conduct personal outreach with students who've stopped out to help them overcome obstacles that they have faced. We've also developed a new system-wide welcome back form so that students can quickly resume studies without having to go through the application system again, right? So make it smoother for them to get back. Another thing that we've been doing is expanding credit opportunities for students with summer and winter courses. Many of our students from underserved communities haven't had the opportunity to earn AP test credit or participate in these dual enrollment programs that I'm hoping will continue to expand, so that they arrive at the CSU with fewer credits than their peers. And so by providing financial support to students to attend summer and winter intersession courses, we're helping them to catch up in earning the credits they need to graduate. We've also been working on making sure students understand the path, right? So digital degree planners assist with course selection and graduation, right? Our academic programs should be and are expected to be rigorous. But figuring out which courses to take absolutely should not, right? So planners provide students with accurate, real-time understanding of what they need to take to graduate, and even provide corrections, real-time corrections when a student misses a key academic milestone. Another thing we've been doing along in this broader effort is looking for and removing administrative barriers to graduation. And while these vary across the state, right, different campuses have different ones, you might recognize some of them. Like, for example, some campuses had automatic advisor holds for all students for every term before they could register, right? So removing that in an effort to help students get those classes registered and not put that roadblock in front of them, right? Or students who have had an academic disqualification issue, some of those had, a matter of days to resolve the issue. And so that's been evolved to allow weeks or months sometimes to give students time to address the issues. And like Yvette mentioned for the UC, we're looking at classes that are challenging. Classes that might perhaps have high rates of non-passing grades, right? So we're zeroing in on those courses, ones that are required for graduation that might have high numbers of students, underrepresented students in particular, earning Ds, Fs, or withdrawing from the course. Now, we want to maintain high standards and academic rigor in those courses, while also redesigning the courses to use evidence-based approaches to help students succeed, right? Things like small group discussion or supplemental instruction that can be woven within the course to help our students meet those goals. And so I feel like I could talk about things that we're doing under this initiative all day, but that just gives you I think, hopefully a taste of what we are doing to try to close these gaps.
Thank you. And we really hope that, 5 years along the line, we see this transfer population really reflecting the community college population. And I have a kind of a related question for you, Aisha. And I would like you to reflect on, some of the results from the report. So in the report, we show that even though transfer rates remain low, we also show that there are some positive trends that are emerging. Specifically, we are showing that the students who successfully transfer are increasingly likely to do so within 2 years of initial enrollment. However, of course, as Cesar also mentioned, that's only 10%, of all students who transfer. But this trend seems to be driven by increases in the share of students starting community college while attending high school. Of course, we have seen the growing dual enrollment, but also increasing the share of students completing transfer level math and English courses in their first year, and also by increases in the share of students transferring with associate degree. So I would like to personally applaud the community college efforts, and I would like to give you the opportunity, Aisha, to reflect on these results.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Definitely excited to see those results, right? It's always helpful when data can help confirm for us that particular initiatives that we've been focusing attention on are yielding results. And when we think about the ones in particular that the report cites, I think it connects well to the previous question about how do we close racial and ethnic opportunity gaps. So when we think in particular, starting with dual enrollment, right, we see not just the evidence from this report, but fairly compelling evidence even nationally about the role that dual enrollment can play in supporting students to get onto their college and career pathway earlier, and in particular, the role that dual enrollment can play in closing equity gaps. And so that's really going to be important for us to double down on as we think about expanding dual enrollment. How do we do that equitably? We also know when we look at the dual enrollment data for California, that there is typically an underrepresentation of our BIPOC students in dual enrollment presently. Mm-hmm. So part of our work moving forward is really pushing our system to utilize dual enrollment as an equity gap closing tool. And we're really looking at least from the perspective of, a state chancellor's office, how do we remove some of the regulatory barriers or policy barriers? How do we not just message that it's important for dual enrollment to be implemented equitably, not just message, though we will, that dual enrollment should actually be targeted at your BIPOC students and your low income students as an open door opportunity for them to get an early start on college, but how do we also look at regulation, look at policy, look at procedures that currently exist around dual enrollment, where there's a lot of gatekeeping right now in the process? How do we eliminate that gatekeeping and really open up the door for dual enrollment for all California students? You will hear us talking about, under the direction of our new chancellor, this idea of a 9th to baccalaureate initiative, right? This vision of what would it mean for every ninth grader in California to be engaged in dual enrollment. And we have an important goal that we're seeking to meet that is in alignment with and coming from the governor's Recovery with Equity Plan and the roadmap for community colleges, that we actually focus on having every ninth grader to complete high school with at least 12 units of dual enrollment credit. So we're doing a lot of work right now, literally, working with subject matter experts, descending on our colleges individually and in regions to talk about dual enrollment, to provide models for equitable dual enrollment expansion towards this idea of a ninth grade to baccalaureate initiative, having every ninth grader take some sort of career exploration course, having every ninth grader design a college education plan that includes dual enrollment credits, getting them on that pathway earlier, helping them to get some of their transfer requirements done while they're still in high school, exposing them to financial aid and the FAFSA and that process while they're still in high school. So really we're really working on rolling out a comprehensive program around dual enrollment, because we think that that's going to continue to be an important lever. Of course, the work around AB 705, 1705, or equitable placement support and completion, as we call it here at the Chancellor's office. Excited to see that result. The impact of that change cannot be ignored or understated. I always say it is the single greatest equity reform of our time. We're continuing to make progress there. We're excited to look at the upcoming data and definitely seeing a greater implementation of that important reform. And so we're going to continue that work, to continue to support our colleges in that work, and continue to provide opportunities for accountability along with that support for that work, because we definitely see how important it is to get students on that transfer pathway through transfer level courses as the early part of their career, and then also looking at how do we start to do that in dual enrollment as well. And then we know the ADT in concept is a very helpful platform for students, right? We're seeing a very substantial increase in the number of community college students that have completed an ADT. We see, as we look at the data, as was shown in the report, that opportunity for an ADT does help students in the transfer process. And yet we see, as the report also talked about, that we have a large percentage of students who complete that ADT and yet they don't transfer. So we need to understand why. Why is that taking place? That leads into the work of the AB 928 committee, which I know we'll talk about, where we've been digging into better understanding why are students completing a degree that's on a transfer pathway, and then some not applying to transfer, others applying and not getting in. We then see students who apply and are admitted, but then don't enroll. So we need to understand, why are we losing students across each step of that pathway, so that we can truly ensure that the ADT is a guaranteed degree as it was designed to be.
Thank you, Aisha. And I would also like to tell you all that PPIC is committed to do it, research on dual enrollment. It is committed to do it research on AB 75 implementation. We are going to have a new report coming out in November, so look for it. And despite these promising results, I think that there is consensus that there is still work ahead. Transferring students continue to face numerous challenges in transitioning from community college to four-year institutions. These challenges, you already have mentioned some of them, but include inadequate transfer advising, insufficient transparency about whether community college credit transfer to a four-year institution, different requirements from UC, CSU, and the private institutions, lack of financial aid alignment between community colleges and four-year institutions, lack of early momentum, limited access to resources and support services, among others. So I would like to ask you, in your opinion, if you have to choose, what is the biggest challenge to increasing both the number and diversity of transfers? What would you choose? And let me start with Yvette.
Wow, so that's a really hard question, Marisol, because these are all connected. So choosing one is a little difficult. But I want to echo Dr. Lowe in a statistic or finding that I was struck by in the report, and it's that a quarter of ADT earners aren't moving on to transfer. And so if I had to choose one, I would say that it is financial. and particularly preparing to finance your education beyond community college. So financial understanding and preparation, I think, is really key. Students work, they have families, they have other responsibilities, and it can be difficult for them to think about continuing education and possibly incurring debt. So it's important to help prospective students understand how they finance their education, because fundamentally, students aren't going to pursue any of those other things if they think they can't afford to transfer. But at the same time, we have to replace rumor about what institutions cost with a reality that's grounded in a student's own circumstances. So we have to meet them where they are and how they understand how their own circumstances factor into their financial preparation, because someone else's circumstances aren't necessarily your circumstances. At the university, we have robust financial aid that's going to cover all tuition and fees for California students whose families or they themselves are earning $80,000 or less. There's financial aid to cover housing, books, transportation, and food. They can work on campus. And if they've maxed out their federal aid at a community college, UC is still going to provide university grant to offset that. So we need students to understand early what's possible financially for them and help open them up to pursuing transfer expeditiously rather, because they know how they'll finance it. That's why in our dual enrollment program, the offer of a provisional financial aid offer is really key, so that students are reassured about what's available for them should they meet the requirements of the program.
Thank you, Beth. And that's so true. I remember a few years ago, a RP study showed that, they list what are, according to students, what are the biggest challenges that they face. And then I believe financial aid was on top of the list. So what about you, Laura? What you will choose?
This is such a hard one. I think we could talk about each of these extensively. So since Yvette talked about financial aid, I'm going to talk about transparency. So one of the big solutions here is to make the path clear, right? To help students get to their bachelor's degree through transparency about what's required and how to do it. You need to be able to see the route so you can plan your journey. And we are doing so many things to try to help students with this. And I think the one that I'd like to highlight, we've talked about it a little bit here, is the associate degree for transfer, right? This is a program that has been very successful and it's growing, right? We see the number of students earning ADTs before transferring doubling in the last, so I think your report cited from 2015-16 to 21-22, we see a doubling for everyone across all groups. Latino students, it went from 25 to 53%. For Black students, 14 to 36%. This is a path that can help students, right? More information, understanding what's required helps. And it is the degree with the guarantee. It lays out for students what the requirements are for at both the community college and the CSU after transfer. The entire path, the entire journey is clear. And ADT earners are guaranteed admission to at least one CSU campus with junior standing. And we know that once they come to us, it makes a difference, right? We've seen that half of the transfer students who come to us with an ADT achieve their CSU degree in 2 years. That is impressive, especially then when you compare it to 35% of students who come without an ADT, graduating in 2 years. Right, so with an ADT coming in to the CSU, you have a 15 percentage point advantage for finishing in 2 years as a transfer student. That's huge. And it's not like we just say, okay, here's the pathway, right? Once they come to us, there's a number of services and programs to help those transfer students succeed. For example, we kick things off with transfer orientation sessions, right, that provide transfer students with more personalized and relevant introduction to campus than perhaps a traditional first-time freshman might need, right? It's a different kind of orientation. And I will say, given the success of the ADT program and some of it, what's in AB 928, where we have students who are all going to be on ADT programs if they exist in the community colleges, we want to work with our community college partners to increase the number of ADTs that are offered. And on the CSU side, working to increase the number of campus programs that accept these, right? We want to continue to grow and nurture this program in order to provide that transparency that might help students be more successful.
Thank you, Laura. And finally, I know we're kind of getting to our Q&A portion of the program, but I would like to give Aisha the opportunity to weigh in and say what she thinks is the biggest challenge.
Absolutely, and I will try to be brief. Similar to my colleagues, this was a very difficult question to hone in on one, but I will build on where Laura left off around pathways. And in addition to the ADT, really, how do we build a statewide intersegmental infrastructure around this process of co-designing programs and pathways together? Because that is really the key, that across all three of our systems, that we have really a more unified process for co-designing pathways and programs together. That is where faculty are directly engaged in that and helping to lead that work, so that these pathways naturally flow from the community college system into the CSU, into the UC. I really do think it is a greater expansion of the dual admissions concept, right? That a student is actually guaranteed transfer into their local institution, right, where they live, because we know for our community college students, uprooting their lives and their families to move is often a non-starter, and in their major. And how do we build a state infrastructure and resource a state infrastructure that will allow us to build those sort of pathways, so that we can get to, I think, what we would all agree would be this grand vision of it just naturally flows. ADT transfer naturally flows from community colleges into our four-year institutions, and vice versa, under the concept of dual admissions, that when students apply to CSU or UC and are not admitted, they naturally flow to their local community college. And if we can get to what I know for some is controversial, but a more unified system, right, across our segments of those processes for the natural flow of students across our segments, and really removing those barriers to students' entrance into the institutions, and then removing the barriers to intersegmental coordination, I think that would go a long way in helping us to see these numbers continue to improve.
Thank you, Aisha, and amen to that. And we're going to begin our audience Q&A in a couple of minutes. There is still time to submit your questions. Please send them to the email address on the screen and include your name and organization. The email is ppiceventquestions@gmail.com. However, I want to take I need to do this last question because it's related just with what Aisha was mentioning. So this question is directed for Yvette, and is proponents of a simpler transfer process say that it will be easier on students if UC participated in the ADT or built around the ADT with reasonable modifications. What do you think? What is the UC position on this proposal?
Right. Thanks, Marisol, for this question. And I know it's the elephant in the room when it comes to transfer. So let me be clear. The university sees expanding ADTs as an opportunity to enhance transfer, particularly at those colleges where fewer students transfer to UC, right? Your own study has demonstrated that we are really overrepresented in the Bay Area for transfer. And where the university accepting ADTs could boost ADT availability at those colleges. I think it's also important to note that the university already accepts the ADT as part of our comprehensive review and admissions. We consider ADT earners earning to be a positive. And when there are more applicants for a major than there are spaces, then an ADT is going to give a student a bump up in the selection process, much as it does at CSU and its impacted majors. And the master plan is already guaranteeing all transfer eligible students a place at the university. So both ADT acceptance and admission guarantees are part of the opportunity at UC for transfer students. But ADTs aren't available across the state at all CCCs at the same rate. And as Laura talked about, it's really important that we grow ADT availability. And what that means is that not every student has the opportunity to earn an ADT and to receive that boost, and particularly in STEM fields. And our work on the AB 928 implementation committee is looking at that. At the same time, your report is making some really important points about ADT earners. They're completing transferable math and English sooner. The rates are up for Latino and Black students who earn ADTs. And these 2 points are really important to the university because our goals include diversifying our transfer population and the colleges from whence they come. There are several ADTs where the major prerequisites for UC are the same as they are for CSUs. And so students who are pursuing those ADTs are not going to see a difference between the segments. But there are majors at UC that require that students complete prerequisites that aren't required in the same way at CSU. And these prerequisites are the same ones that are required of students who enroll at UC as freshmen. And these prerequisites are important because they allow students to succeed in UC's upper division coursework without needing to take additional courses while they're enrolled at UC. Students don't want to take additional coursework that could slow their time to degree and that may make it more challenging for them to succeed in that upper division coursework. That being said, there's always opportunity to explore more ways that ADTs can benefit students at UC, and you'll hear more from us soon about some ways we plan to do that.
Thank you, Yvette. And this half an hour went by so fast. There is still so many things to talk about. I would have loved to ask you about the work of the AB 928 committee. Both the three of you are members of that committee, and you are doing wonderful work. We wanted to hear more about dual admissions, but I need to move to the Q&A. And I have the first question, and I apologize in advance because most likely I'm going to say the name wrong, but it's from Dr. Maureen Scharberg, professor of chemistry and biochemistry in the California State University, East Bay. And her question is, have you noticed whether transfer students are now preferring different modalities in their courses? For example, are they now more likely to prefer online courses, hybrid, or in-person courses? And anyone who wants to take the...
Well, hi, Maureen. At CSU, this differs by campus. I don't know that we've tracked specifically what a transfer student prefers in their enrollment pattern versus any other student. Campuses have different experiences with how much online they're offering, what students are enrolling in, but also, every CSU student can take, I think it's one online class from any CSU that's offering it per term. So they can, if they're at East Bay and they see a class they want to take at, say, Pomona, they can do that online and receive credit for it. So we try to make it accessible for them. Yeah.
Thank you.
Marisol,
yes.
If I can add to that, for community college students, we have definitely seen an increase in the desire for online courses post-pandemic. And I think that's logical and makes sense. We should have anticipated that. We created a new normal for students that they adjusted to. And as colleges were sort of returning back to normal, they have interestingly seen this trend where their online courses are filling more quickly. There's more of the demand for online courses. But that said, it's always a mixed bag. There's always still a percentage of students who prefer in person. So colleges are really having to navigate how do they increase what was the traditional level of their online offerings and yet maintain, a necessary proportion of in-person offerings, because students want different things and they learn best in different ways. We do know that the online seems to be particularly attractive, again, to those working adult learners who need that flexibility that online and hybrid provides. So we've definitely seen an increase in the demand for online post-pandemic that we think will be retained long-term, but there is still always some percentage of students that have that preference for in-person.
And I'll just add anecdotally, when we visit community college campuses, we see students on campus taking their online courses. And so I do think it's all of those modalities, but we are seeing a preference for online, even if they're taking that online class while they are on campus. So I think that has a lot of implications for four-year institutions as we strive to enroll more older students or working parents as students, that there's going to be a greater need that we need to anticipate for being able to bring flexibility into our campuses, maybe accelerate that flexibility in order to accommodate students who have found this is the way that they can complete their degree on time.
Definitely. So we have our second question that I'm very happy that somebody asked this, is how can a student get involved in dual admissions at CSU and UC? And I would like to add my portion, which is, what is the reach that you guys think so far this program is going to have in their pilot stage and then after the pilot stage? Thank you.
Sure, I'm happy to start at UC. Again, we are in our first year of piloting the program. And the way that students are invited to this program is that they've applied as freshmen, but their profile indicated that they were missing some key requirements to be successful as freshmen. And so students who get involved in it are invited to it as a function of having applied to the university. Once they have done that, then there's a whole process where we're helping to guide them through making sure they're taking those courses right away as community college students and not holding them off and delaying transfer, making sure that they have the right supports around them for doing that. We don't yet know, Marisol, what that looks like because we're still working through all the data, but we invited several thousand students to participate in this program this year.
Thank you.
Yeah, the CSU has launched our program. It's not a pilot program. This is our program. It's moving forward. It opened August 1st. It's called the Transfer Success Pathway Program. And enrollment for this first cycle goes through September 30th. So there's still a few weeks to sign up. How can you learn more? calstate.edu/transfer success, all one word. And so this is this dual admission program. New students can attend a community college and enter into an agreement with a specific CSU campus and program with the intent to transfer within 3 years. And if they meet the requirements of that, which is an ADT or another transfer pathway, if there's not an ADT for that path, and the student satisfies the agreement, they have guaranteed admission to the program and the campus. There are multiple components to this tool, including a CSU transfer planner that is still growing. But we've already got like 2,500 students creating an account for this. But this allows them to look at their eligibility, see the programs, enter into that transfer success pathway agreement, and really understand again, transparency, what it is they need to do to get into that desired campus and program. And I'm really excited about the potential for this. So there's still a few weeks left. Encourage folks to go sign up.
Thank you. We're excited to all this data coming in and see the impact that this is going to have in changing the trajectory of thousands of students. And we have one last question, and this question is directed for Aisha. And is, can you speak about the partnerships with California private and independent colleges and universities? And I think this is the perfect question because really, because of data limitations, we were not able to address that in our report. But nevertheless, we know and we acknowledge that the private sector is very important in the transfer function.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, Marisol. I know we've been grappling with those same data limitations with our AB 928 work as well. So to the question, so we have at the California Community Colleges system a partnership with AICCU, that is the membership organization for our California private and independent colleges and universities. And then at the university or college level, we have a set of individual statewide MOUs where we're basically taking the framework of the ADT and also creating MOUs with private institutions along those same lines, looking at specific majors and programs and pathways and designing a pathway from the community college into that private institution. So that is work that's been underway for quite some time, not just with our California private and independents, but also with other four-year institutions across the nation, and a particular focus on our historically Black colleges and universities as well. That said, this is a place where we want to invest more time and energy is on those pathways for our private and independent colleges here in California. We know that there is a reality around capacity with our public four-year partners. And so we want to make sure that we have pathways for students into UC, into CSU, as well as into what might be their local private university or college that's available. And so we have some conversations underway with AICCU about how to strengthen those partnerships, further develop those ADT-like MOUs with their institutions so that we can proliferate further opportunities for California's residents.
Thank you, Aisha. And I'm very sad that the program has come to an end. I wish we have another hour to keep talking and learning from the three of you. We feel very lucky that we were able to have the three of you in this panel. And we leave this event with a lot of important takeaways and things to think about for our research. So thank you very much. And I would like also to thank again Cesar for a wonderful table setting discussion. And I also want to take the time to thank our funders for supporting today's program and to all of you for joining us online. So if you pre-register for this event, you will receive a survey later today, and we hope you will take a couple of minutes of your time to let us know how we did and how we can improve. Please be safe and have a great afternoon. Thank you.